And I also want to extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Judy Little, the president of VACO. She traveled here all the way from Surrey County, but we're really fortunate to have you. It was a really pleasant surprise. I want to introduce our Louisa County supervisors that are here. Our chair, Troy Wade. Administrator, and Andy Wade, our Economic Development Director. You're all going to have a chance to introduce yourselves, but I wanted to introduce the other Region 7 Director, and that is Bob Thomas from Stafford. Thank you for coming. Lastly, thank you to all of VACO's staff, which they will introduce themselves here shortly. But I want to thank them all for working so closely with our staff to get this meeting done. It's important for all of us to get together to discuss local issues amongst ourselves and for our legislators to give us, Region 7, a greater voice to identify common areas of concern with a broader range of localities. It certainly impacts our economic development strategies. Forging relationships and networking here together tonight keeps an open line of communication between our counties as we collaborate to find solutions. What I've heard from the counties in the region, issues are mostly focused around economic development, and what I've heard are concerns about infrastructure, including water and sewer, broadband, roads, transportation, including rail, clean renewable energy, public safety, schools, and tourism. The need to collaborate is obvious in order to achieve both local and regional goals. A few examples of partnerships or regional opportunities: Louisa County is currently partnering with Fluvanna and the James River Water Authority to bring water to the county. Culpeper is working with Fauquier and Rappahannock for a new public radio system. Caroline County is teaming with the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance to comply with the General Assembly directed regionalization to take part in the Go Virginia grants program to facilitate economic development. And King George just recently announced their first solar farm project in the greater Fredericksburg region in partnership, I think it's with the Corona Group. There are many other partnership things that are going on in our region, but I just wanted to hit a few because we are certainly doing that. And tonight, a little bit later, when we focus on transportation this evening, we as a region have a variety of transportation needs facing local government with a scarcity of transportation dollars to address all of our needs. Again, welcome to Louisa County. We really appreciate that you took the time to come. And with pleasure, I will now turn the meeting over to Dean Lynch, the Executive Director of VACO.
What we need to do, let's go around the room really quick and introduce ourselves if we can. Start over.
Tommy Miller with Orange County Economic Development.
Andy Wade, Louisa County Economic Development.
Tom Barlow, Louisa County Supervisor.
Sandra Robinson, Louisa County Attorney.
Judy Little, VACO President, and Surrey County's Vice Chair.
John Jenkins, Dahlgren Supervisor of King George County.
Richard Granger, King George County Board of Supervisors.
Mike Smith, Acting Deputy County Administrator of Stafford County.
Keith Dayton, Deputy County Administrator for Stafford County.
Katie Boyle, VACO staff.
Alyssa Rico, VACO staff.
Gage Harder, VACO staff.
Christian Goodwin, Louisa County Administrator.
Troy Wade, Supervisor.
Jake Thomas from Delegate Ransom's office. Jason Delliver, Senator Ryan McDougall's office.
Cassie Horn, Senator Bryce Reed's office.
Delegate Buddy Fowler, 55th House District, parts of Hanover, Carolinas, possibly.
Bob Thomas, Chair of Stafford Board.
Elvin James, legislative liaison for most of the localities in Baco Region 7.
Bo Blevins, VACO staff.
Nick Donahue, Deputy Secretary of Transportation. Joe Lurch, VACO staff.
Larry Land, VACO staff.
Alan Martin, Assistant County Administrator of Caroline County.
Nancy Long, Supervisor, Caroline County.
Patrick Roney, Executive Director of Rapid Ed Regional Commission.
Jim Kroger, Orange County Supervisor.
Brian David, Orange County Administrator.
Stephanie Heinzelman with Bay Corp, the insurance program out of Roanoke.
Kathleen Guzzi, also with Bay Corp.
I'm Tom Fowler, Town Manager for Town of Louisa.
Charlie Cully, Caroline County Administrator.
It's great to have all of you all here. Probably this is our, I think this is our largest crowd that we've had for a regional meeting. Fantastic. Give yourself a hand. All these legislators sitting up here right together, they must be on the hot seat up here. A little bit about what we do in Baco in our regional meetings. We have gone all around the state for the last 2 years doing regional meetings because we're trying to put Baco in your communities. We know that a lot of you all don't come to, may not come to our annual conference, may not participate in some of our steering committee meetings, but nevertheless, your voice is important to Baco. And we need to hear from you. We need to hear what your issues are so that we can take those issues back to our steering committees, let them run through our legislative process, and get those on our legislative platform so that we can act for you as your lobbyist in Richmond, along with Eldon, so we can act for you during the General Assembly session. I think if you talk to the legislators, you'll know that we have a wide presence, and whether it be land use issues, whether it be human service issues, finance issues, or economic development issues, transportation, all those issues really counties deal with. And so we've got to have input from you to help us guide us in our lobbying efforts, our advocacy efforts in Richmond. So that being said, these regional meetings, this is our, help me out here somebody, this is our 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, this year?
Yes, sir.
Fifth this year. So we're kind of, feel like that we're road weary, road warriors maybe. We've been all around the state. But with us has been a partner. We couldn't have done this without one of our huge partners, VACORP, our VACORP Insurance. And thank you, Stephanie Heinzelman, for being here, Kathleen Guzzi for being here. And before we get on with the program, let me just ask Kathleen if she wants to say just a few words about VACORP.
Great, thank you, Dean. I'll be very, very brief. It is a pleasure to be here. I've always partnered with Baco. Sorry. But I know exactly the challenges you guys are facing, because before coming to VACORP, I sat where you're sitting now. I just retired with 30 years of experience in local government, the last 12 as county administrator, first in Bedford and then Botetourt. So I know the challenges you're facing, but also know how exciting it can be. Bottom line is VACORP is really very similar to what you do, and our basic premises are the same as yours. We're all about customer service. You're our members, we're here for you, we want to hear from you. Financial stability. Key, every locality is looking for that. That's also what VACORP wants to be all about. We provide stable rates over 20+ years now. We make decisions that we know are in the best interest of the members. Your board of directors, they help guide the staff. Again, we're part of you. We're here to listen to you. And thirdly, and most importantly, really, we're all about safety. Well, I used to tell my fire and EMS folks, your most important job is to come back at the end of the day, at the end of that call, safe and sound. So we have lots of risk control services, we have lots of training programs, and they're free. They are part of your membership. So if you're not taking advantage of those, please give me a call, give Stephanie a call the 800 number so you don't have to spend any money. We're here for you, we want to serve you. I love local government, and I love this role now that I get to play in terms of helping you all. I just do it on a quiet side. I'm not the county administrator anymore, so it's fun, and I want to be there for you. So if you need anything whatsoever, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you.
Kathleen and Stephanie, thank you all for the, I bet you they're warm cookies now after being in the car. And soft drinks, so help yourself during the meeting. The layout of the meeting, what we're going to do next is we're going to have a speaker talk a little bit about transportation, the deputy secretary talk there, and then we're going to have our legislators say a few words if they want to say a few words, talk about some of the issues that they may be CTMAC coming up in the 2017 session. And then we're going to give all the localities a chance to tell us what we need to be working on for you all as far as looking at public policy, looking at legislative issues, or things that just you may just want to tell us about. So it's your opportunity to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie now to do the introductions. Thank you all for being here.
So now I would like to introduce Mr. Donahue, Nick Donahue, who is our Deputy Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth of Virginia. He spoke at VACO's Region 8 meeting in Loudoun County and detailed the Commonwealth Transportation Board's first 6-year improvement plan under Smart Scale, or HB2. The CTB approved $1.7 billion in transportation projects throughout Virginia on June the 14th. CTB received 287 project requests last fall and fully funded 163 projects. Under the process established through Smart Scale, the most pressing needs were met first. You'll hear a little bit more about that tonight. Please welcome Nick Donahue.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I just want to say one more thing. I heard an interesting story about you, and I think you should share it.
This is never a good thing. It's a state official when you walk in, the local man says that.
Something about you trying to be a good Samaritan and getting your backpack stolen or something.
Oh, that's Nick.
Well, that's another. Oh,
I promise I'm a good Samaritan too. I know it's the state official said
They'll get started down there.
I promise.
You see how easy things get started.
And the real judgment tonight is going to be whether you clap when I'm done. So you clap when I started, so we'll see how that goes. But thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. Let's really keep this as an informal discussion. I want to be here to be a resource and be helpful and informative to you all. So if you have a question along the way, or if you think I've said something that doesn't make sense, I do that sometimes, just let me know. We'll figure out if I can actually make sense of it, or we'll quietly move on to the next subject. What I'm really here to talk to you about is, Bo and Larry have asked me to really talk about the changes that have taken place in transportation over the last few years. And I've worked on and off in Virginia over the last 12 years in transportation, and I really think the last 3 years in Virginia transportation have been some of the most transformational changes that we've seen probably in the last 30 years. And so, really all started when the legislature took the courageous vote in 2013 to raise revenue. And, that was the first time we had done that from 1986. It didn't work out quite as well as we had planned, so one of the major components of that was eliminating the cents per gallon tax on fuel and switching to a sales tax. And at that time, we thought gas was going to cost more than $3 a gallon, potentially even $4 a gallon by now. As you all know, I paid $1.94 this morning to fill up the car before I came out here, which means we're not really collecting quite as much gas tax revenue as we were hoping to from that new bill. But I also want to say we have a lot more money than we would have had without it. So without that bill, we'd really be in a tough place. And so the legislators who voted for that really helped move transportation in Virginia forward by finally providing some of the resources that we need. But then what's happened over the last 2 years is we've actually started to think about, well, how does our program work? And when we didn't have cash for so long, we didn't really worry about it because we were always broke. And so there wasn't too much we could do. We were stumbling along to keep projects going and really juggling half-funded projects here and there and making a lot of you very, very unhappy. Probably on about an annual basis whenever we came out to do our fall and spring hearings. And really, I think what's important to try and understand what's changed is to really think about how things used to work. And so, back in the day, you'd come up to us, we had the fall public hearings, you'd show up, you'd get a whole crowd of all your friends and people who understood how important the road project was in your jurisdiction. You'd line up at the 6-year hearing thing, that thing. And you talked to us for a while, telling us how important it was, the things it did for safety, the things it did for congestion. And then you'd wait for a few months. And we'd go back as state officials and we'd figure out the plan. It's a 1,000-page document that's really arcane and hard to understand. And we'd release it in March. And then we'd invite you all to come back and take a look at it and tell us what you thought. And some years, if you got enough people there and the state officials would be like, gosh, they had so many people, we really should do something. Stadium project cost $10 million. We'd give you $1 million in year 5. Well, $1 million ain't going to candidly Jack to build a $10 million project. Might not even finish, PE, maybe it does that, but it's certainly not buying right away. We're not putting any asphalt down. It's also in year 5. We have one-term governors in Virginia. That means the staff and the political people who put it there, they're not going to be there that year. But the way a 6-year program works, you got that $1 million we're thinking about you. Making sure you know that. Put on there a $10 million project, and a year passes. You show up in the fall again, and you get all your friends there. Thank us so much for recognizing the importance of your project. You just need to get that next $9 million there, and then we're going to build that sucker. You get folks just really shake your fist at us and look very solemn. Okay, they're serious this time. We really got to do something. And then you'd show up in the spring. You'd be like, okay, well, it's in year 5. Year went by. Should be in year 4 now. So you flip to year 4, and you're like, where's my $1 million? Like, nothing in year 4. We brought so many people this year. We shook our fist. They hurt us. They must have moved us up to year 3. They accelerated us. So you go to year 3, nothing's there. Then you go to year 2, nothing's there. Like, okay, well, maybe they had a revenue cut. Maybe we got pushed back to year 5 or 6 again. And you go through that, and then you realize, hey, I'm not in here. And you come to the spring meeting, you stand in front of the board, and they're at this long table, and you say, what happened? Our project was so important. We thought we had an understanding. We told you all the things we did for safety and for congestion. And they'd sit there, and then they'd nod. And then the meeting was over. And if you're lucky enough, a member of the board or staff or somebody else would come up to you and be like, well, there was this other project, and it really did a lot more for congestion, and its safety and economic development it was really great. And you'd be like, well, but my project was also great, and it did all those things. And then we kind of nod and say, yeah, but this other one did more of those things. And you had no clue if it did or didn't, and we didn't give you facts. There was nothing backing it. The only thing you actually knew at the end of that meeting is your money was gone and your project wasn't moving forward. And it was a really opaque, untransparent process where we spread money around, kept a lot of people happy here and there, but we weren't actually building that much. If we have 10 projects that cost $10 million, we put $1 million on each, we're actually doing a disservice to all 10 of those people in the whole state. And so we really tried to change a lot of this, starting with some reforms that were enacted, working with the governor and the General Assembly in 2014, and then built on in 2015. And the big one is House Bill 2, which we now call Smart Scale, because when you Google House Bill 2, a different result comes up these days. It's not about transportation anymore. So we call it Smart Scale to really make sure folks know what they're looking for there. And that's a prioritization process where we're going to evaluate all projects across the state to really understand what do they do for congestion, economic development, safety, accessibility, and environmental quality. And for each and every project, we're going to score them, and we're going to score it relative to other projects in the state. And so the best project for congestion gets the top score, and everyone else is relative to them. And we publish those scores, and we make them public so that you can see those scores. And then we also look at the benefits relative to the cost. And we're trying to really drive politics to the extent possible out of the transportation decision-making process, because the way things worked in the past really wasn't solving our problems. And so the way we're trying to make the process work now is every summer and fall, and actually right now, we're going to solicit applications from local governments, transit agencies, planning district commissions, and MPOs. We're then going to close that period at the end of September. It is every 2 years, so after this year, there's going to be a 1-year break. We score every single project. And unlike in the past, when the 6-year program would come out in March or June, or April, excuse me, we're going to release those scores in January, just like we did this year. We had some poor intern who had to march around the General Assembly building the second week with a book that had 287 pages in it with a scorecard for every single project that was scored. We gave one to every single office, as well as to the money committee staff, so they could go through that along with our list of recommended projects for funding. And we're going to do that again this next year. We want that information to be out there for a full 6 months so that people can look at the scores, see what a project's going to do for congestion, the economic development it's going to support, and understand the projects the Commonwealth Transportation Board is considering recommended for funding that June. Transportation is a complex process, and the way we used to run this system where, you didn't know anything, and then we put out this 1,000-page document, and you had 3 weeks to show up at a public hearing, wasn't fair to you all, or others across the state, because it really stifled your ability to have input. So we released all the scores in January. We put out a recommended scenario that same month. We take public comment on it. We purposely do this while the General Assembly's in session because we want to be accountable to both the local elected officials, but also to the Assembly. The budget's ongoing. I mean, it's kind of a risky thing if you think about it, compared to how transportation officials used to work this system in Virginia. One of the other really important changes that goes along with this, though, is we're never just going to be thinking about you again. Your project is either funded or it's not going to advance in that particular round. So with the last round of Smart Scale, we had 287 projects that were evaluated for funding. As I think Dean said earlier, they requested $7 million in funds. If we were doing this under the old way, we could have thought about all 287 of you all and given you a little bit of money, but nobody would have actually been building a darn thing. So what we've done is the Commonwealth Transportation Board has adopted a new policy where if they fund a project and pick it under the Smart Scale process, it is funded through construction. It is funded for PD, it's funded for right-of-way, and it is funded to put the actual asphalt in the ground. And that all happens in 1 year. You're going to see that allocation in the 6-year program covering the full cost of that project. So we funded $1.7 billion worth of projects, which was about 163 of them. Or said differently, we said no to 124 people and $5.3 billion worth of requests, which wasn't the best thing to do. A lot of folks were really upset with us when we did that, but we felt that if we were going to move the ball forward in transportation, we have to stop thinking about it and start building things. And the only way we can start building things is we fund a project all the way through to completion. And so again, we're soliciting projects again for the second round of Smart Scale right now. So for you, if you're a local government, and some of you didn't submit projects in that first round, please, talk to your district staff. They're there to help you. You have about another week to let us know if you're planning to apply, and you'll be guaranteed technical assistance from the department when you submit that. But also, you don't have to do that. We really want to make sure this process is easier for local governments. This isn't going to be like a federal Tiger grant or other things where you have to hire a consultant, no offense, Elder, other consultants in the room, to fill it out. Really what you have to do is say, I want a wider road from here to here, or I want to put turn signal here. Here's the economic development sites nearby, and we will take care of the rest. We'll score for safety, we'll score for congestion, we'll do everything there for you. So we really do want to make it a simple process, but also if you do let us know in the next week that you're planning on putting in an application, the district staff will go out of their way to work with you on those, on your application and try and figure out, are there ways you can make it more competitive? Is there information that you might not be putting in that would help increase its score? Or other things generally just to be of assistance to you all at the local level as you put this your project in. Now I know some of you put in projects in the first round that didn't get funded. And so the question I've heard when I've gone to some of these forums is, does that mean it's just all over for me? Should I pack up my bags and go home? You should. Because there's two reasons why you shouldn't. The first is everything is relative each time we do this process. There's no perfect. The perfect project is the best one in a given cycle. So this first round, a lot of Northern Virginia projects didn't score too high. And that was because Interstate 66, one of the most congested roads in the entire Commonwealth and Mid-Atlantic, a 21-mile improvement of that was submitted for consideration. So if your project was a congestion reducing project, that project's a rock star. And many other projects didn't score well because relatively to that project, they didn't do a lot. But that project's now been funded. So a project last year that didn't score as high is going to score much higher this next round, in fact 4 times higher, because the next highest scoring project got a quarter of what I-66 did on congestion in this second round. The other thing that's available for local communities, if your project didn't score well, we are offering assistance where we will bring our own engineers or consultants in to help you look at your project and see if there are ways we can redesign it to try and reduce the cost while keeping the amount of benefits similar. And so, an example of this, which I think I really want to give credit to the folks down in the Bristol district. For about 15 years, they had a plan to redo exit 17 I-81 just outside of Abington. There's some economic development sites where things have already happened and a few other ones that are really trying to get some folks to come in there. And for the longest time, their plan was to completely redo the interchange. They're going to replace the bridges on the interstate. They're going to put in these, new upgraded ramps. They were going to do a diverging diamond interchange. I mean, this was going to be like the most perfect interchange, in the whole entire Bristol district. It cost $157 million. Very clearly, that's going to be your project's going to have to be a great project to get funded if it costs $157 million. And the folks at the Bristol district, we got recognized that as the first round of this approached. And what they did is they went in and said, well, half this interchange actually works. The movements from I-81 southbound heading onto it, I forget the route number, I apologize there, those work fine. What we actually have is a problem is 2 of the ramps need to be a little bit longer because there's queues that back up on them, and there's one movement that we don't really accommodate. So they went in and said, how much would it cost to extend 2 ramps to make them a little bit longer and to add 1 new ramp to put in this new movement? Well, it was $17 million. It's one of the top scoring projects in the Bristol district. It's now funded, it's moving forward, and it's going to be constructed in the next 4 years. And so that's another tool that we're trying to provide to a lot of local communities to help them, because for a long time, your benefits and your benefits relative to your costs weren't an issue. We designed a lot of perfect projects, and then we ran out of money, and they've been sitting on the shelf for 10 or 20 years. We don't have enough money, as I said. We have a lot more money than we would have had had the revenue bill not been passed, but we are certainly not just walking around handing out cash to anyone that asks, because we don't have enough to do all the things that are out there. And one of our goals is, perfection is really, really expensive, and it's often unaffordable. So we're trying to avoid doing perfect anywhere, so we can do good in more places for more communities. And really, that's what I would ask you to do. If you have that old plan that's sitting on the shelf, talk to your district staff, see if they have some ideas about how that might be able to be redesigned, how to drive some of the costs down. Another great example is I-64 on the east side of Richmond from 295 to Bottoms Bridge. It's about a 5-mile stretch of interstate there. It's really fun in the summer. It's great time, particularly on Sunday evening. So much fun. That project cost $69 million was the cost submitted by the Richmond MPO. And I was, the Richmond district member said, I really want to do something here. And we had $59 million left. But it was one of the higher scoring benefit projects. And so I called the Richmond district administrator and said, Rob, Mr. Brown from the Richmond district really wants to figure out if there's something to be done here. Maybe, I know we can't probably go 5 miles for, $20 million less. But could we go 4? Could we go 3? Like, can you just take a look at it and get back to me in a few days? That was at like 4 o'clock on a Monday. At 3 the next day, the very next day, he says, we can do all 5 miles. Rob, what are you talking about? It was actually 79. I said, how are you going to build all 5 miles if you have $20 million less? Like, something's up here. He goes, oh, well, the plan from 20 years ago was to buy right-of-way and widen to the outside of the road, take several homes, knock down a business, and spend $16 million, and then we were going to build 12-foot shoulders on the inside and on the outside because, well, that's what the standard said a long time ago when this was a more rural area. He goes, that's stupid. He goes, we don't need to knock down people's homes. The median's 40 feet wide. He's like, we're just going to widen to the inside, and it's an urban area. We don't need a 12-foot shoulder. So he saved $15 million in right-of-way costs and another $4 on not building a 12-foot shoulder. 23 hours, $19 million. So I just really encourage you to work with your engineers. They're smart people, and they are really trying to help you with this process. I do need to manage some expectations for this next round of the prioritization process. Last time, we actually ended up with a lot more funding than we thought we were going to have, and that was really for 2 reasons. One, the feds, for the first time in about 12 years, actually passed a long-term federal transportation bill that increased funding provided to the Commonwealth, and so we ran all of that money through the program last year. And then also the 460 project between Richmond and Hampton Roads, that contract was canceled, which candidly freed up hundreds of millions of dollars, the bulk of which ended up in this process. And so that kind of increased the amount of money we had available from about $800 million to $1.7 billion. We don't have another 460 project that's going to be canceled, and the feds can't pass another long-term bill because we're still in that other bill. So this year, we're only going to have around $800 million, which means we're going to have half as much money as we had last time. And so I really just encourage you to be creative and talk to your staff as you think about different types of projects that you can put in. And again, remember, you're competing within your districts, but then you also have the ability to compete statewide. So that is important to think about for your different types of projects. Where do you want to compete, and where do you think you have the best ability to fund it? The other thing that I want to say is you're going to start seeing money outside of this prioritization process flowing soon for bridge and pavement rehab. So another program that the General Assembly created in the 2015 session was called the State of Good Repair Program. And this is for capital, basically bridge replacements and pavement reconstruction, stuff that's outside of the maintenance program. And VDOT has developed a formula that was approved by the Transportation Board back in June that distributes money to each of the districts based on their needs. The Fredericksburg district gets about 12% of that pot of money. The Culpeper district gets about 6%. Now I know some of you from Culpeper are saying, why do we only get 6%? That's not fair. In this formula, you actually don't want the higher percentage, because that means your roads are bumpier and your bridges are in worse shape and they're more likely to be weight boats. So a lower percentage, as weird as it may sound, is actually a good thing in the State of Good Repair Program, because it means on a whole, your assets are a heck of a lot better than your neighbors. And I understand you may completely disagree with me. That's just my perspective on that. So we're starting to distribute some of those funds out to the localities, and the districts are really picking those projects. And again, under this program, you're fully funded. You're not partially funding projects. So if we're going to redo a stretch of pavement, we're funding all of it, and we're going to build it in the next 2 or 3 years. If there's a bridge that we're going to put funding on, we're going to completely rehab it or replace it in the next 3 years. We really need to change the way in which VDOT has worked, where in the past, one governor said, here's my list of priorities, go do this. By the time they get halfway done with it, a new governor's elected, he says, what is this list? Who made this? Crumbles it up, throws it away, and says, here's your new list. If you're an engineer and you're out there trying to build things, that's really not an efficient way for you to actually move forward. And so we're really hoping that by fully funding projects, we can improve the efficiency of VDOT. And then another change that really will help cement a lot of this is the Commonwealth Transportation Board no longer serves just at the pleasure of the governor. And so in recent years, if the board can be removed by basically any reason by the governor. In fact, in 2012, a member of the CTB was removed because they voted the wrong way or against the governor on a project in their district. Transportation is too darn important for our economic success in Virginia for people to be pressured politically into voting a certain way on a project in their neck of the woods. I live in Richmond. I love this part of the state. You know this part of the state better than I do. And you know it better than the folks in the Secretary's office in Richmond do. And so we want a Commonwealth Transportation Board that feels free to vote its conscience, that feels free to stand up to the administration when it's appropriate and really state what they believe is right for their part of the state. And the board, as of July 1, now no longer serves the pleasure of the governor. They're appointed by the governor, subject to confirmation by the Senate. They can be removed for cause, so negligence, malfeasance, misfeasance, etc. But they can stand up and say, Mr. Secretary, this is the worst policy and project I've ever heard. I vote no. And the only thing the Secretary can do is try and persuade them otherwise, because they will be here after we are gone when the next administration comes in, because their terms will carry on. And so we hope that that will actually ensure this priority shifting that happened every 4 years when administrations change doesn't come back to the Commonwealth. Two other things that I want to talk about before we open up for questions is Virginia actually just competed very, very successfully for a discretionary federal grant program for the Atlantic Gateway Project, which is a major upgrade to the I-95 corridor. That grant program had about $800 million nationally. We decided to be really, meek and ask for $200 million of it. And what we are going to be doing is extending 95 express lanes from where they end in Garrisonville all the way down to Route 17 in Fredericksburg, building a new bridge across the Rappahannock River on 95 southbound, extending the express lanes 8 miles north from where they end in Alexandria, the Potomac River, building new park and ride lots, one in Stafford, one in Spotsylvania, and then also adding about 14 miles of new rail track from the Potomac River down to about the Occoquan there, which is going to improve freight capacity for the port. Really linking up with Virginia Avenue Tunnel, that project they're doing in DC. And it's also going to let us run new BRE trains, one down to Spotsylvania and another out to Manassas there. We were awarded $165 million by the federal government, which is a little over 20% of the entire pot of money, and the biggest award by a factor of about 2. And so we're really pleased with the award that we got there, and we're going to be moving forward with these projects, starting construction as soon as next year, and we hope to have them all completed by 2020. So I know some of you are in the 95 corridor, and you've been a big fan of VDOT since we opened the 95 express lanes in late 2014. You know, the commute's been great southbound from Garrisonville there. We're really working. We've heard you. We know there's problems there, and we're trying to get that fixed as soon as we can. The other thing that's just really exciting in transportation from my perspective is the General Assembly approved $350 million in bonds to basically double the capacity of Norfolk International Terminals. That's the single largest investment on a capital perspective that's ever happened to the port here in Virginia. And that's really going to make the Commonwealth much more attractive, we hope, to distribution facilities, manufacturers, and other, things of that nature as we really try and diversify our economy here with the federal budget cuts that we have ongoing. We're also in negotiations with the owner of a private port adjacent to our port to see if we can enter into a long-term capital lease with them where they will double the capacity of that port, and at the end of the lease, we have the right to purchase that facility from them. So I hope we'll have good news on that as well here in the next few weeks. But even if we don't get that $350 million is going to double the capacity in IT. And if we get both, we're really going to position, I think, the Port of Virginia to really grow and also make Virginia much more competitive. We're currently the only port that can be served by the new ships going through the Panama Canal. So we actually had the first one come through about 3 weeks ago and went into the Port of Norfolk and called there. They are so big, folks, that if we lined up every rail car in one of those and put them on the tracks, it's 95 miles long. It's 10,000 20-foot equivalent units. We could double stack them and it's still 40 miles long. Now, we're not going to do that. Not happening. But just to give you a sense of how huge these things are, that's how big they are. And we really hope they come here. New York is raising their bridge, and since we're the only other port they can go to, that really puts us at a competitive advantage where when they come through the canal, it's Virginia and New York. They're always going to go to New York. We're not going to knock out that port there. They're a little bit bigger than us. But we're hoping we can really take advantage of this over the next few years where we're that only port. We've modernized Norfolk International Terminals, and then if we're able to do this deal with the Virginia International Gateway, we can double the capacity of that already very modern terminal, which is going to be a great thing for manufacturing and distribution in Virginia. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
More or less it's a question. Or actually a question of board investments. We appear tired of you all. We started discussing our 2016 legislative program. Brian gave a lunch. And one of the perennial issues of funding for roads, particularly primary and secondary, the board came to really a defining moment saying that the state is really focusing on the primary system, certainly from a socioeconomic point of view, that's what needs to be done at the state level. But really, our interest is dirt roads and getting some curves out and getting things a little bit better on the secondary road system. And so really, the legislative priority that we're going to end up at some point, and certainly we'd like VACO to start championing, is really start tending to get in the dirt road world. And you've got rural rustic, you've got a lot of useful tools out there to be able to do it. But the folks that I work for, the folks that talk to me, these big projects, by extension, certainly will benefit the whole channel. But we're really down in the granular kind of how do we get roads paved and some curves straight. So if funding can come that way, that would be wonderful.
So you are going to see a bump of on the unpaved roads starting in the next few years. It was funded around 16 million, I think, for a number of years before that kind of basically dried up at one point. You're going to see it ramp back up to 25 million a year, and again, it kind of stay stable around that amount. I'm not saying that's a right or wrong figure, but the secretary.
I'll share it's probably a little low, but stay down.
I couldn't imagine you having that.
I had to say that.
But so there is going to be some increases coming no matter what in the next few years for that program. I also want to say that I wouldn't prejudge the prioritization process to say that it's only going to focus on primary. So I actually just drove on School Bus Road here. And I don't know why Google took me around instead of through Mineral and sent me west to come back east. But I took School Bus Road. Louisa County actually got $7.5 million to relocate essentially a third or half a mile of School Bus Road to allow to provide direct access to Coates Industrial Park and another business industrial park there that's going to serve several hundred square feet potentially of economic development and align it with the existing chalk level road to create that four-way intersection there. And again, that is a secondary of secondary roads.
And thank you for that, because we may be putting probably a letter of intent for secondary roads.
And
because of safety issues. And so that smart skill absolutely serves those needs. I'm back down to dirt road and dust.
Yeah, to be very direct, I don't think an unpaved road and paving is going to score particularly well in that process. I do hope the increased funding in the unpaved roads program helps. We all are also pushing the engineers to be reasonable on unpaved roads. So we had an example, and this was also down in Bristol District, where the engineers said we had to widen the road and cut down all these trees and do these other things. We paved it, and the commission was like, why? And they're like, well, we got to make it safe, for people who live there. It's like, well, they live there now, don't they? And they're driving on the road now, and we're assuming they're safe because that's the way the road's been for as long as we can remember. So surely they're used to the road. Why don't we just pave them?
That would be fine, but that would not even have that. We are at the point that we would like the roads as wide as they were 10 years ago. And that is where we're at. The lack of ditching, the lack of...
It's eating away on both sides.
Right, and the lack of proper motor grading of the roads, and then when it rains, it washes. So the roads literally, I can show you one right off the bat, that has reduced by 5.5 feet in width from 10 years ago. And then we as a county require people to build roads to state standards. And it's really tough to explain to people, oh, yeah, you have to build a better road than the road that gets you. That's what we're really looking for.
No,
it's just to bring our roads back to where they were. That if we can get that step first.
Well, if one of you had a car, I think you had some staffers with you as well. I'd love to take that and get some folks in touch with you. We've also started doing some other treatments in different parts of the state that can stretch that. So, for example, in one part of the state, they said, we don't actually want our roads paved. But the dirt roads weren't holding up. We had the exact same problem. So we actually started mixing concrete in with the gravel. It's not a full concrete road. It's a little bit cheaper. It sticks. That may not work for your situation, but what I really want to say is we want to be creative. We'll try and help. If you give me your card, we'll definitely help.
He's going to make those transportation community too.
So I suspect we'll hear about this again.
Oh, yeah.
There's a trailer.
Yes, ma'am.
In Stafford County, we were very excited about a lot of the money that's come our way recently. The last funding of the Smart Scale, the southbound river crossing was funded, and now that's come under the Atlantic Gateway. So where's that $125 million?
You're safe. You're in the exact same place you were before. It made our grant application more competitive. So we wrapped it all in there to show the full corridor type of improvements that are taking place.
Okay.
So you are still fully funded. You are going to be moving forward. I think your funding starts next year.
Right, okay, so my question is, does that 125 get reallocated in the whole state, or does that get bumped into the next application coming up?
That 125 is still on that corridor. So the Atlantic Gateway costs $1.4 billion.
So that's our state park.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so what the 165 we got actually funded was the 10-mile extension south of the express lanes to that CD bridge. So we're actually hoping to have the express lanes into that collector distributor bridge, so you don't have a lane drop until Route 3, or actually south of Route 3 in Spotsylvania County, which I think will change the 95 corridor there for the good. And then it also funded a lot of those rail improvements, particularly at the northern end, going towards the river there that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to fund.
Okay. I have one other question, and you may not be the right person for this, and I see Nancy Long from Caroline County, and we just had a town hall meeting, actually Rob Whitman did with Caroline County.
I think I know what you're going to ask me about.
Yeah, you do. So this whole high-speed rail, if you want to call it high-speed rail, freight rail, what are you hearing out of your office on this?
So again, we are, and just so everyone in the room knows what we're talking about, it's not just us talking to each other. Virginia is in the process of studying improving passenger and freight rail from the Richmond area up to the Potomac River. It's known colloquially by a lot of the bureaucrats as the DC to RVA study. Whenever you hear that, what they're really talking about is how the heck can you get on a train from Richmond to DC faster and more reliably, and how can we move freight trains better on that corridor as well. So we're in the middle of doing an environmental impact statement for that corridor, which was funded by the federal government on an 80-20 share. So we put up 20%, they pay for 80% of that. And the way the environmental impact statements work is the feds make you look at everything. So you look at what happens if we don't build anything. How's the corridor going to work in the future with the growth you expect to see in freight trains and population on the corridor? So you say, well, what if you improve the rail where it exists today? What would happen there? Can you do that? Are you going to knock down a bunch of homes? Are you going to blow through a historic district or other things of that nature? And then they say, well, why don't you look at building a new rail line? Which I think is creating a lot of consternation in certain parts of the state right now. And so that is, we're in the middle of that process. The state is going to be working with the Transportation Board to identify a preferred alternative, probably in the next 5 months or so, to look at some of those issues there. At this point, I candidly don't know what's going to end up being the preferred alternative. I'm not saying that to obfuscate, I candidly don't know. We're waiting for the end of the public hearing so we can go through the detailed comments as well as the benefits from that. I do want to kind of be clear about the purpose of the study, because I know there's been a lot of stuff I've read in the paper and I haven't been at the hearings. So this may have already been sent, just didn't make the paper. If that's the case, I apologize. There's 3 things we hope to do with these improvements. One is to make the trains go faster. That's really just one of the benefits.
Which trains, the freight or the passenger?
The passenger, which also by extension may make the freight trains go faster, because we both spend time sitting behind each other with the current 2-track situation. So passenger trains want to go between 50 and 79 miles per hour, and freight trains tend to want to go about 40 miles per hour. And so that means inevitably when they come up on each other, one or the other is waiting, and a lot of times both end up waiting along their trip on what's called a siding for about 1,000 feet, just off on the side there. So one is to make the trains run faster, and that could save 15 or so minutes between Richmond and DC. The second one, which I think is actually the more beneficial one, is to be able to run more trains. So today there's about 6 trains that run from Richmond to DC and in each direction. We're trying to figure out if we can increase that by 7 or 8 trains a day, so you could get up to 14 trains in both directions, potentially running between Richmond and DC and stopping at points in between. So really increasing the frequency as well as the reliability of those trains. And the third is to get more rail capacity for the port and the National Gateway, so that we can have the capacity in that corridor to deal with the increased freight growth that we expect to see in the rail movement in that corridor. Right now, the 95 corridor is basically at capacity. If you look at the VRE trains, the Amtrak trains, and the freight trains. And I think, rail, when you look at it, it's not like a road, even though it's a rail road. When you look at capacity, so people always say, well, this track's empty, couldn't you just switch? And if there's not a switchover, which is a $10 million, $15 million investment, you can't switch. And when trains move at different speeds, it means you can't actually run. So if every train ran at 60 miles per hour, we could run more trains today. But because they don't, and one moves really slow, you have to schedule them and time them so that the freight train is at the siding when the passenger train comes up at that higher speed, or they both stop, and then that has shock waves down the whole system. And so we really are full right now, particularly north of Fredericksburg, in that capacity, because that's where you're in the VRE territory. And then once you get to Alexandria, all the trains from the western part of the state actually merge in to the 95 rail corridor, what's known as Alexandria Junction. So people who get on a train in Lynchburg, they actually go on the 95 rail corridor for that last 8 miles there. And that's really one of the major bottlenecks. And then the next bottleneck is the Long Bridge, which is a 2-track bridge across the Potomac River. When you drive across the 395 in DC, if you look to your right, you see this rusty hull of metal there. That's the Long Bridge. It's much older than the road bridge you're driving on. It's actually safe despite its appearance. I always thought it needed to be replaced, but I've been told it's very structurally sound despite the rust and beautiful orange color on it, which should otherwise be a black bridge. And we're looking at, can we add 2 more tracks across that? We're working on the engineering right now to build a new bridge with 2 tracks. Because then once you get into DC, you have 2 tracks that go into Union Station for the passenger trains, and those go all the way up to Boston, and some trains actually go to Maine. And then you'll have 2 tracks going to Virginia Avenue Tunnel, which is a project Virginia's co-funding with CSX and DC, where we're taking a basically 1890 tunnel that's wide enough for 1 track today, but you can't double stack trains either. So it's 1 train, 1 bucket. We're lifting up the road, actually it's Virginia Avenue, and we're blowing up some of the rock there, so you can have 2 tracks going through this tunnel, and then we're lowering it, so you can run double stack trains through that corridor, which will really help double the capacity there. But the issue is we still have the bottleneck in Virginia, from Fredericksburg to DC, and so the Atlantic Gateway is going to help, as I mentioned earlier, with some of that, but there's going to be additional improvements that are going to be needed there in the future. I'm not saying that's a rail bypass of Ashland, Fredericksburg, or anywhere else, or that means running a 3rd track in Fredericksburg, which is not going to be a pleasant experience if anyone tries to do that. But we're going to keep going through the public engagement process. The board ultimately is going to recommend a preferred alternative to the Federal Railroad Administration, and then they are going to concur or reject our alternative. So unlike on a highway, where the state is really firmly in the driver's seat, it's more of a shared responsibility here on the rail side. But again, we are, as the state, the Commonwealth Transportation Board is the decision-making body, is going to recommend a preferred alternative to the federal government for their concurrence or rejection.
Yes, on the study, what you have to remember is, if you do the study, and I understand you need to find out where your needs are, and you need to find out what the solution to look forward to. If you do the study and you choose our recommended route, the property values of people who live on that route that you recommend, they are still, they are dead. Because nobody's going to buy that property. And we don't have funding for that project, and we may not have funding for that project for 20 years. So what do we tell our constituents? What do we do about our property values that drop and then our tax base drops? So you can't just look about how you put your trade from one point to the other point. You have to figure out what this is, how this is going to affect the citizens and the tax base of our counties. Because you're going to kill us, come through us, and staff are, oh my gracious.
No, I understand.
Too.
I understand
So
exactly.
don't choose a route. Just take your study and put it in a box someplace until you're ready for it and you've got your funding. Don't
They're saying that it's already affecting realtors are already disclosing with people. Well, there's a possibility.
Yeah,
And that's just right now before there's even an environmental study out there. So once the study becomes permanent, I feel for these people.
I understand the concerns. I also think that if we don't start planning and developing what the solution is going to be, there's never going to be the funding to build it, and then we're stuck in a situation where the rail capacity for the port and the passenger capacity along that corridor, both VRE and Amtrak, is essentially set, and it's not going to increase. And so I know it's tough. I know it's really unpleasant. I mean, you have folks in Charlottesville where the state actually bought right-of-way, and for 20 years didn't build anything. we're actually selling it now. Ultimately, on that bypass that never got built because the feds, 25 years after we did the study, said this doesn't actually solve anything anymore. You can't use federal money to build it, which meant we couldn't build it. And so I understand what you're talking about, and the thing I think we're going to do is be as respectful as we can. Going through that experience has made us very sensitive to this particular issue, but if we don't ever have plans, we're never going to have funding, and we won't be able to make the critical improvements that are needed in that corridor. But the responsible thing for us to do as state officials is to be upfront with everyone about the things that we're considering, to be transparent as we make a decision, and to not leave people in limbo like we did in the 29 corridor in Albemarle County. Because those folks actually had their houses bought, and we didn't have to do anything with them. So we took people's houses, they moved out of them. The state literally became a landlord. We put them out for rent. We said we were going to knock them down the middle of the road, and we never even did it. And that would be the absolute worst thing we could do in this other side state. We're not going to do that. I don't know where we're going to end up, ma'am, so I can't tell you it's going to be this or it's going to be that. The thing I would say is that improving the rail capacity in that corridor is very, very important for all parts of the state, and we need to bring this study forward to completion.
But you need to think, what are you going to do to balance out the effect of that study on the counties and the citizens, as long as that. But that means you I don't know, buy their houses now on Woodward, and for 20 years until you decide to build a railroad, but they're not going to be able to sell their homes. Shop owners aren't going to be able to lease out their shops if they think trains would be going through there. It's just, please keep in your mind that there's an economic value now to us as compared to the benefit 25 years from now.
No, that is very fair. And the Commonwealth Transportation Board, we've talked about this several times at our meetings. Director Mitchell has updated the board about these public hearings and that specific concern. So we're going to make sure that's something the board takes into account as they consider this. This is going to be one of the biggest location decisions we've made in the Commonwealth in a very, very long time. If you remember, with the interstate systems, we went through this and worse 50, 60 years ago. And at that time, there were no rules, and because of the way that was handled in some of the parts of the country, they created the rules we have today. But the board is going to take those things into consideration, and I can commit to you that I will make sure they know, one, that I heard this here, but also that they hear some of the comments that came from those public meetings. We've been meeting with, folks from Randolph-Macon and other people in the state, particularly where some of those bypasses are being proposed. And we understand there's a lot of consternation and concern. Again, I think the thing we want to commit to people is, we're going to be transparent, and we're going to make sure you understand why we're making the decisions that we're making, and we will take into account the public comments that are provided.
Well, and I think the most important thing is the public relations and the lack of communication up to this point in time. I mean, I was participating in the Spotsylvania meeting. I've never seen 250 people more angry in my life. And there were no answers for them. The entire thing, all of the communication and the way the letters were sent out and people walking on people's property, I mean, it has just been handled very poorly. And I think everybody, all of us in this room, if we got those letters and we had that happen to us, we would all agree. So I think probably the most important thing is we've got to go back and say, we made mistakes, we are sorry. There's got to be better communication. I think that's really the key.
I'll talk with Director Mitchell to see what was done there. And if we screwed up, I think one of the things Secretary Lane has always said throughout his tenure is, if we've done something we shouldn't have done, we're going to own up to it. And we'll be honest about what we've done. I mean, on the 460 project, when we found out that there was money going out the door, that there wasn't even a road that we could have a permit for, first thing he did was stop spending money, which was technically in violation of the contract. And then the second thing, he would stand up in front of the General Assembly and say, guys, we spent $300 million on a road we can't build. And so this secretary doesn't shy away from those things. So I will look into that, and if we have screwed up, or if we could have done a better job, even if we followed the rules, which I find often is the case, is that the rules are the bare minimum, and if you want to make sure people get pissed off, you just follow the rules. And so I'll take a look at that to see if that's what was done. But I do think also as we get closer to a decision, we got to make sure we're doing more than the bare minimum. Because the only thing the bare minimum does, again, is make people angry. So I will look into that, ma'am, and see what we've been doing. I don't know enough now to respond to.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Let me thank Mr. Secretary for being here. Great discussion. Let's give him a hand.
And a cigarette tax. And you know, Fairfax and Arlington counties, they do have that ability to levy, I think it's 30 cents per pack on the cigarettes. They're looking to actually double that and use the additional money towards schools.
Okay.
I think if we start talking and having the conversation with our legislators, Delegate Fowler, he sits on the finance committee there, House Finance Committee, and has probably heard a lot of these discussions, and we work really closely with them. But I think if we can start having that discussion in our steering committee, adopt a position, that might be something that we can get some traction on. We've always lobbied for equal taxing authority with cities and towns. I mean, you guys know as counties, you're doing a lot of the same things, providing a lot of the same services that cities are doing. And towns that, you know, they have a nice, position to come from there. But join our steering committee, finance steering committee, get involved and help us in the session.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I did have a comment. Hopefully I don't misspeak a little bit, and maybe my partner in crime here can back me up here. Last year, as one of the first things that we were faced with was the Dahlgren Heritage Trail. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. For lack of better terms, it's a nice trail. It's a big part of our county, or it could be. And we voted unanimously to allow it to be a part of the state park system. We endorsed it. And everything looked good. The Navy base backed us up. Everything was looking great. The county overwhelmingly supported it. The citizens did. Of course, nothing is unanimous. But for the most part, everyone liked the idea of it for a variety of reasons. State legislation comes up, suddenly there's blowback. And even though it's a part of our county, the state pushed back and we couldn't sell it to the state park system, or we couldn't get it into the state park system. I think I speak for a lot of people, particularly in Dahlgren, since it is my district, when I say I'm very disappointed with that. And I want to know why. Why was there such pushback? Why can't we do that? It's a big benefit to our county. Why?
No, thank you for sharing that. You know, it was interesting when we looked at the budget after that came out of the General Assembly. You would notice under Department of Conservation and Recreation, so many instances there was language which basically restricted any state funds from purchasing any further state parks. There just seems to be some sort of hostility,
right, and
to expanding the state park system.
If I recall, the language almost singled us out.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, the bill that initially went on, it also didn't have a sponsor. It was quoted in the paper as a mystery bill.
Thank you.
So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on it, and I don't mean this to be negative, but.
And if your board develops a resolution, a policy, official policy on that, please communicate that to us. But
well, I mean, we unanimously backed it up.
Yeah, it was just very interesting to look at the way that budget came out last year and all the language, not only for that one, but for other parks too. Okay, have we got all the comments from King George?
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Louisa County, our host county.
I think that I've got 3 issues I want to bring up that I think might resonate with some folks. 2 of them right now, maybe one more bit later. One of the pieces of on our legislative agenda is state responsible prisoners. Mr. Turner serves on the jail board, okay? The state is, I can't remember the exact date, it's 62, 72, something like that days once they've been sentenced. After that, the state is responsible for them. But in order to save money, the state decided to close a lot of prisons to save money. But what they don't do is, after they're responsible for a prisoner, they leave them in our local jails until they find it convenient to come pick them up and they pay us pennies on the dollar for what it costs to keep them there. Once they're their responsibility, then we can't just go take them and handcuff them to a fence at a safe penitentiary and let them deal with them. We're forced to keep them. And if we have the available beds, I think it's fine to keep them, but I think that we're going to try to get legislation passed this year we'd like to support that says once a prisoner becomes state responsible, we will keep them happily if we have enough space in our facility, but the state's responsible for paying us how much it costs to keep them there once they're responsible for it. Another,
Flooding, can I ask a question? Is that flood, you're also increasing the per diem, right?
I want the per diem to be set by the jail based on how much it costs that jail to keep them there.
Yeah.
Another, and this might sound like I'm kicking a gifted horse, but the state funds a certain amount of local positions for constitutional officers, some weird hybrids in county government, and then SOQ positions in schools. And we work really hard to take care of our employees and come up with compensation plans, salary increases. And then when the state comes up with this is where somebody's picking the dead horse, gifted horse, this 2% increase they're going to give all the time. And they take the credit for a 2% increase, but when you actually do the math, they're paying less than 30% of the 2% increase. They're only paying that portion on state-funded positions. And we know that you can't run a school just with SOQ positions. You can't run a sheriff's department just with the amount of positions you get paid from the comp board. So I'm grateful for the money we can get it from them, but they also mandate that we make it 2%. They only pay a portion of the 2%. So I would really like to see some legislation passed that says, we're going to give you this block of money, and as long as you equitably split it amongst your employees, then you can do it, but not putting a floor on what we have to do, because it costs us a whole lot more money. We have our own plan in place already, so we've just given them a 3% raise the year before. We're going to skip a year and we're going to give them a 3% raise next year. If the state throws a 3 or a 2 or a 4% in the middle of those years, it ends up costing us a lot more money, and it throws our whole system and our whole plan into flux and kind of out of the window. We've got a step program that's only a 1.5% a year over 35 years, and then they mandate we have to do 2, but they don't pay for it. It's not very conducive to us implementing our own system and coming up with one that works that we can plan on, and then it happens like that this year where it's tied to revenues, and then there's a really good chance it's not going to happen, so it just throws you into further fluxes. We have to do our budget, and there's not very much time between when we have to do our budget and when they make up their minds what they're going to do. So if there just weren't those strings attached to it and mandates of what we do, and maybe I think the key to it would be if we can't get it just passed where you can equitably split it up, at least give the localities who already pay above and beyond what the state funds for those positions. If the state only gives you $35,000 and you're paying them $45,000, you shouldn't have to. They shouldn't mandate that you give them 2% on top of the $45,000. You're already paying them 33% more than the state pays you for them. So those are two that I think that most localities can experience frustration with and deal with now. The third one is a bit Louisa specific right now is we are getting into a bit of a tricky situation with FEMA about floodplain maps. They want us to update our ordinances to be restrictive, painful, and FEMA has erroneous and incorrect maps. They know the maps are flawed. They know they're bad. They're from 1997. They're bad then. They're even worse now. The contours are wrong, and they refuse to change them.
They admit that
They admit they're wrong. So you guys, the state can't do anything about telling FEMA, but at least maybe we can get the General Assembly to support telling them that they're as moronic as I think.
Sounds like a resolution.
Please, sir. Any sort of help we can get on a...
Should we put that word in?
Yes.
I would. Any help we can get from VACO, from our legislators, or the entire General Assembly, hopefully, and the governor's office, to tell FEMA if they're going to try to, and their threat is, if you don't comply, you don't pass an ordinance that's the exact ordinance we want you to pass, and DEQ is kind of in there with them, that we're going to pull you out of the flood insurance program, so there's no federally backed or federally subsidized flood insurance won't be available in your county anymore, which means you have to go to Lords in London or somewhere like that to get insurance, which can double or triple the cost of insurance.
This has been looming as an issue that we've heard about.
And they're cherry picking how much counties they go to. So, I mean, it's not like they're doing it statewide, they just pick a random county, go read your ordinance, say it's no good, fix it with a lien, and pull all your flood insurance for your people.
And citizens are really affected by this. I mean, if your map is wrong, all of a sudden you have a mortgage on your home, whoever your lien holder is going to require that you have flood insurance. Absolutely. And if you're not part of the federally backed flood insurance plan, then all of a sudden your insurance costs that you're mandated to pay by your lien holder.
I was going to say, one of the complaints that I've heard over the past year or so is this whole issue of what is sort of derided as desktop engineering. The modeling which is used, especially, I do work with the Chesapeake Bay program, if you're familiar with that. And it does really loom as a really significant issue. And believe me, this is not the first place we've heard that. We appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Everybody's going to get hit with that sooner. Absolutely. You've got water in your county.
Oh, you don't want to get me started.
Larry, question, please. I'm not sure I understood the gentleman correctly. Some of the pay increases, it looked like you were talking about comp board people, your constitutional officers, as well as school teachers, which are, these are apples and oranges.
When you guys give us a 2% raise, it's for every state-funded position. So it goes to our constitutional officers and our SOQ positions, which are standards of quality positions for teachers. So your 2% goes to, you give us enough money to partially fund.
First of all, it's the state share of the 2%.
Yeah.
What it really works out in that one of oranges.
It's not a mandate,
well, I go with, it's not a gift horse. There was language in this budget where in school funding, the schools have to certify that the state money goes to the state awarded position, awarded certification. That same language, unbeknownst to even the comp board, got into the comp board's funding for this raise. And so we were put into a position where we're already staffing comp board funded positions for constitutionals and locally 100% supported, that we had to certify that this raise goes to those positions. And we weren't, as Troy said, we're in a pay cycle, there's constitutional officers that agree for their employees to be on our pay plan, and we're having to go, we had to start going through these gyrations of how do we give and certify that that pay raise went to that comp board funded position, and our county funded positions, two deputies side by side, you can't tell the difference between the two unless you look at where the cash came from. One potentially could get 2%, another couldn't. And so that word certification, it really caused us a whole bunch of stuff. Now, fortunate or unfortunate, the revenues didn't hit their target and we stand down. But I think Dean, this was one that slipped through that it caught us and the consequences would be really tough. We would have to come up with a whole bunch of money to get it equitable and force us to give some raises that we weren't prepared to.
It would have cost, the 2% would have cost the total of it if we funded, because it's hard to fund half, 60% of your teachers or 60% of your deputies and not give a raise to the other ones when they do the exact same thing. So for us, it would have, all the money we got from the state would have covered the cost, would have covered about 25% of the 2%. And we were responsible for coming up with 75% of the total dollar value that it would cost to give 2% to everybody. And so it would be a lot easier on us if the pot of money that came from the state stayed the same. We're not asking for any more or any less, but you can distribute that pot of money equitably amongst your people, however it fits into your plan best.
Before the word certification popped up, that's how we did it with the comp board funded positions. That word certification now can triples.
And the interesting thing is that the Secretary of Finance did not know that language, the certification language.
So this is the first I've heard.
First that he had seen it, and so we continually think that we kept asking for clarification. Because the comp board said, don't worry about it, do like we did do it like you did here before. But then when they went up the chain and asked the Secretary of Finance, he had no idea. And so he delayed, and truthfully, he delayed before making a decision. And then finally, the revenue projections were not met, so he didn't have to make a decision on that. He didn't have to go against the legislature. But this was a House generated thing. Just know that it came out of not House Finance, but House Appropriations staff that we will try to get fixed this year. It's on one of our top areas.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, any more, Louisa County, any other issues?
We got a whole bunch.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a lot of problems.
Okay, it's Orange County's turn.
Yeah, well, and I've already been jumping, Brian David, County Administrator from Orange, and we checked the box with dirt roads, that's been checked. This certification, appreciate you bringing it out, it really started causing us business. And we kept going to the comp board, and they said, we don't know. And we're counting down to July 1st, and we had an all-hands constitutional officer sitting around our conference room table and said, do you want to, we were in the position of either having to forego the state raises. I mean, they made a conscious decision to forego the state raises because there wasn't any guidance, and they understood the county's position. And so it really materially got messed up the works. So enough of that. Profit, absolutely. There's some huge unintended consequences. Fortunately, our development activity is not such that we have it rolling in the door. But our county attorney is really advised the board that there's not much they can do, and really got a hamstring our ability to have orderly development and really work with developers to mitigate even offsite and certainly fiscal impacts. One thing that we've been dealing with, and I don't know how many other communities, we had a pretty impassioned presentation from the Inns at Montpelier, Airbnb. And we had presentations as part of our legislative discussion, and I've been working, we had, Montpelier got a lot of bed and breakfasts, and they play by the rules. They've got sales tax and lodging tax and permits from the health department and things. They threw, and I asked them, well, other than public safety, that's an issue. People there, what's the fiscal impact? And fortunately or unfortunately, the head of Montpelier, Inns at Montpelier, used to work for a national survey company, Gallup. And the man knows, he worked on this for a while because he retired and hadn't run the bed and breakfast. We have 89 rooms in Orange County. We have 124 Airbnb and RVO. He went through and analyzed the lost revenue from it. We could increase our revenue from just lodging and sales tax to 75%. These are rooms that are off the radar. I can go to the commissioner, or these people signed up, most likely not. We can find out who they are because they're advertising where they are and how to get a hold of them. Airbnb will not allow you to contact them if you give them a phone number. We try to say, here's my phone number, give me a call, I can learn more about your property. We wasn't being subterfuge. Airbnb blocks those phone numbers out. They block emails out. And so there really is, you get the big one, Williamsburg, and all the tourist attractions, and the little Orange County, every penny is dear, just like every penny is dear to Fairfax. I get that. But we have folks out there that are using their homes to generate revenue. Entrepreneur, absolutely, 100%. But all the B&Bs are asking is, let's get a level playing field. Let's just have a level playing field when it comes to regulations, protect public health and safety, and with fiscal investment. Right now, they're at a competitive disadvantage. And so we heard that. We're processing what to do. That could be something we would ask the General Assembly. I know this thing is kind of out the gate right now, but we now quantify our fiscal.
I think just a little bit, just to, we're working on this issue, it's a big one. I've represented Rebecca on this work group, we've been following that. Also, with both the general government and the economic development planning meetings, we're doing a presentation on where it is. We've got draft it addresses just what you talked about, which is, this isn't a technology or, thing. It's really a home-based business, like any other home-based business. And what Airbnb is saying is, well, by virtue of it being online, we're above the law. And that's clearly not the case. And we're looking not only at the zoning division, but the revenue side, and we're working closely with
All right, so we will try to finish up here in a little while so that he can be around for some more questions. If y'all gnaw on him a little bit, that'd be great. Let me turn it over quickly to our legislators to say a few words. And turn it over to Delegate Fowler.
Okay.
You're first.
Well,
Come on down.
this is my first VACO meeting. Thank you for inviting me.
Good to have you here.
And again, Buddy Fowler's Hanover, Caroline, Spotsylvania, sliver of Spotsy. You see my friends from Caroline and Charles. And then we got, I think that fish fry for after we had Caroline, so I'll see you there. But you know, I'd like to think that I have a pretty good relationship with the local governments that I have the privilege of representing of Hanover, Caroline, Spotsy. You know, when I don't kind of understand something or I don't understand the impact of something, I'll generally get on the phone to Charles or to Alan or something so I can get a better understanding of what I'm looking at, what the impact is. You know, and again, the same with Bo or Larry, I call you guys. And again, my doors are always open for the VACO to come in. Being a citizen legislator, you know, I know a fair amount about certain things, but I don't know a lot of things. So, you know, I rely on VACO and, you know, BML, and of course, you know, Charles and the local supervisors to keep us informed on various issues. And of course, Eldon and the folks that, you know, that represent the local governments. So again, it's you know, I just want to piggyback on a couple of the things that Nick mentioned. First of all, the Port of Virginia, you know, the big bond package this year, $350 million. The Port of Virginia is a huge economic engine for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And of course, you know, most of my constituents, you know, they know we have, I guess, a Port of Virginia, but again, it's way down there in Hampton Roads, and so they really may not understand or appreciate the significance of the Port of Virginia. But you know, it's my understanding that basically the Port of Virginia accounts for about 10% of Virginia's GDP. Okay, that's a huge number, which is why we're kind of having this discussion a little bit on the rail and, you know, 460 and all these other things. So again, it's such a big project. When somebody from the Port of Virginia or Virginia Maritime Association comes into my office, I mean, I'm all ears because, I mean, this is really a big deal. So that's a project. I'm glad we can put that one in there. It's going to just be a huge boost for the Commonwealth. Again, there's some other ports, Charleston, I guess Jacksonville, some of the, you know, they want to, I think even Wilmington, North Carolina, God says, I don't know how you get a boat in there. But, you know, they want to take our business away, so we have to modernize and you know, and just make the kind of improvements we need to expand our capacity. I think the capacity is going to double if they, I don't know, like they can do something like that. So that's a huge engine. Nick also talked about House Bill 2. I had to get myself elected to the House of Delegates to get off of the Hanover Citizens Roads Committee, okay? So I'm very much familiar with the pain you guys are suffering, because I would look at these things, I'm going, Jesus, I mean, the road costs this much, I can't believe it. But anyway, and House Bill 2, I think it's a step in the right direction. It made the folks prioritize, you know, limited resources. Again, I think that's a step in the right direction, so I think that's also been a plus. You know, I'm trying to think of some issues that may be coming up. Of course, the big thing which impacts you guys, especially in relationship with us, is money. And of course, we ended up the year, which I'm sure maybe all you guys are aware of now, their caboose budget ended up having about a $265 million hole in it. And then, you know, our revenue forecast didn't quite come in with what we had hoped they would. And you know, we are having to close that hole and everything. Basically, what that means is on the caboose bill, so we don't have as much money being carried over into the next biennium as what we thought we were going to have. So I'm on the House Finance Committee. I will be, I guess, we'll have a meeting, I believe, on August the 25th at Senator McDougal. We're going to Senate Finance, and I'm trying to think of who all this is. We have a meeting on the 26th with the Governor and Secretary of Finance, Rick Brown, is going to come in there, and we're going to talk about some things and just figure out how we're going to, fix that budget moving forward. So I'm sure we're going to, we'll come up with something. But anyway, that's going to be a big challenge. I've heard from a few folks about the property bill we passed last year. I think it's important to note that the bill that eventually passed after it went round and round and round and round, I think we amended it with a lot of advice and input from VACO, so we did make some substantial, I think, amendments to the original bill. However, I think we've all learned that we now have some unintended consequences, which happens frequently with legislation. So I suspect we're probably going to revisit that issue. And again, I look forward to working with VACO and some other folks on that legislation as we move forward to make some improvements on that. So again, I just look forward to working with all you folks, in January. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Fowler. Delegate Fowler is truly a friend of local government. Work with him on House Finance all the time, and thanks for helping us when we have all those bad tax bills out there.
Yeah, hopefully one of these days we'll have a huge home tax reform bill, but we're not going to do it piecemeal.
Next up, and I'm sorry I don't remember your name.
That's fine.
Tell us who you
I'm
are.
not the legislator, so my name's Cassie again. I'm with Senator Bryce Reeves. Since I'm not the legislator, I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm looking at Orange right now, Culpeper, Louisa, and Spotsy. Those are our localities, and I know we've worked with Brian on issues in the past. We carried a bill for Orange this past session. We're already in talks with Stephanie about some issues for Louisa in the upcoming session. So just want to make sure our localities know anything you need, let us know. We try to keep a very open and consistent dialogue with all of our localities. Any issues that you need, come to us, and especially as soon as possible this session. As some of you might know, Senator Reeves has some extra activities on his hands right now, so we're trying to get our legislative package really put together by early November. So come to us as soon as possible. We'll set up meetings, we'll start working on that legislation and getting everything put together. But if you need anything, give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'll be happy to help.
And again, I don't remember your name either. I'm sorry.
I'm Jason Delacruz. I work for State Senator Ron McDougal. We represent 10 counties, and I know we have King George, Caroline, and Spotsy here. So thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. Apologize the senator can't be here. He's representing the state in NCSL right now in Chicago. But just kind of piggybacking on everyone else said, we represent 10 counties, so we kind of rely on our localities to reach out to us. If you're facing any issues, let us know, because we try to spend as much time as we can in every county, but sometimes we don't spend enough time in certain counties or counties that might need a little bit more time. So if you're hearing anything that we can help with, assist with, just let us know. If there's any projects that you're looking at for the HB2, we'd love to help out with that as well. And anything that we can help with, we're there. Office is always open to y'all. I know we have a big budget meeting on the 26th. That's going to be huge. Once it was planned a 2-hour meeting, it's probably going to be like 8 hours, because we have a lot of... I've been hearing a lot more experience in certain fields will be coming in and let us know where we messed up, how we can improve it, and what we're going to be expecting in 2017. So following up with our offices after the 26th would be really great to kind of see what you're going to be looking at in 2017. But thanks for having me.
Bring fast forward on to Senator McDougal that we will be in Deltaville.
Yes,
next
on the
month.
24th.
And we look forward to seeing you. At the next region.
My name is Shake Thomas. I'm from Delegate for Hanson's office. We have King George. She represents 6 counties. King George and part of Caroline's in our county as well. And thanks for having us as well here. We work with the counties a lot and asking what their needs are, what type of legislation they'd like. And what we're doing right now is doing our research and kind of taking suggestions from our county. So what I do is encourage you all to just contact your legislators if you see something that needs to be changed or something that you don't like, and just see if they'll work on that for you and get everything going. But I mean, I'll keep it short. I'm not the delegate, so I don't want to say anything wrong.
Please pass on to Delegate Ransom that we will be in Deltaville next month for another region. So love to see her there. All right, the last thing that we have is a chance for you all to tell us, VACO, your legislative issues, your wish list, or things that you think that we need to be working on. We'll have all kinds of VACO staff here taking notes. Let me tell you who we are real quick. Bo Blevins. Bo is in charge, has been in charge of our educational programs and tax and finance issues. Recently resigned. I will be resigning in September. We'll be working with our VACO VML Finance. Great step for him going that route. Also is Gage Harder in the back. Gage is our communications director who does, you see all this communications coming out of VACO, does a great job. Joe Lurch is recently with us from VML. Joe is going to be doing general government and planning issues with us. He'll be focusing on the Crawford bill and all those type of things. Larry Land, many of you know Larry, environmental issues, transportation. Phyllis Arrico is our general counsel, also does the FOIA, COIA, and all those legal issues, follows those during the session. And Katie Boyle in the back. Katie is with us, recently hired from Fairfax. Got a lot of grief from Fairfax about that, but that's all right. We're glad to have Katie on board with us. Katie will be doing HHR issues and education issues. Did I miss anyone from VACO staff?
Gage.
I did. Okay. All right. Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to do a round robin of all the counties.
Okay, thank you. Did we happen to mention we'll be meeting in Delta?
I'll make sure you guys do that.
Thank you. Okay, this is where we're going to start the roundtable discussion. This is where we hope to hear from you about any issues emerging within your localities that you would like to talk to us about, write to us about, communicate to us about. Let me tell you where we are in the schedule for developing our legislative program. As I think everybody knows, next week on August 18th and 19th, we'll be holding our county officials summit. We hope to see you all there. On the Friday, August 19th, is when all of our steering committees will be meeting during the morning. I know that many of you are members of these steering committees, and that's where we try to have very substantive discussions about issues that we would like to incorporate within our legislative program. Back some weeks ago, and we may be premature about doing this, but we want counties to start thinking about this early, which is to start thinking about issues that they would like to incorporate within their legislative program, especially those that may be the highest priority issues that your county has on its mind as we get closer and closer to the General Assembly. Because the sooner we learn about this, of course, the sooner we can develop strategies in terms of working with the General Assembly during the 2017 session. These meetings really are very interesting. We as staff really get a chance, and this is very valuable to us, to hear from those, our members who we serve. We learn what kind of issues may be unique to a certain region. We also learn about issues that may be very common right across the state. So it's a very interesting process. Anyway, I would encourage you, just as an example, at our steering committee meetings, we do have representatives from the state who are scheduled to brief the committees on certain issues. For instance, transportation. We will have the director of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation there to talk. We will have a VDOT representative, and I'm sure all the other committees will have state representatives. So that's a very valuable opportunity for there to be the kind of communications that are needed between state officials, between local officials, so that all of you are able to serve your constituents more effectively and then govern more effectively than we have. Better communications, that is a vital role that they go place. So with that speech, I just want to start going in alphabetical order here, just to ask you if there are any issues. And we have copious note takers. We love the word copious here at VACO when it comes to taking notes, because we want to make sure that we're very thorough about the way we record these meetings. They're very important to us. And in some cases, it may require us to make changes, maybe an addendum to our agendas for next week's meeting. So I'm going to call first on Caroline County to see over here.
You've heard our number one priority has obviously been the high-speed rail project and the concerns with the bypass in Caroline County. We're also having problems. We have a lot of rail through the county, so it's sort of spread from the bypass south toward the end of the line, with people being concerned about what's going to happen with that project. I don't think our board's identified anything other than the proffer bill and the damage that they did last year. We must be waiting for what kind of, for lack and Delegate Valve, what bad legislation comes from local government out in session to fight in all my years, 23. I always say, do no harm when I go to Richmond and to local government. So whatever bills that are coming that we haven't heard about yet, we will be there, trying to protect our interests as local government officials. So many of the various tax bills that we've had to fight over the years, we're constantly looking for ways to raise revenue just to meet a minimum standard of government for schools. And then Richmond saying, well, we need to cap what we can do with the assessment. I mean, all local governments, pretty much real estate is their primary source of income. So we really don't want to see bills that try to change those funding mechanisms, and then we still have to figure out a way to raise revenue and pay the bills. So don't have anything on the radar right now, and Ellen was at the board meeting last night and went over some things that probably will be able to speak for the whole region about the things that he sees, and we will certainly be there to support him with those things and whatever we learn as the bills start to make their way.
And thank you very much. And as you crystallize these further, you develop official positions by your board in the form of a resolution, whether it be by letter. Please communicate with us. Next will be Culpeper County, representative for Culpeper. Okay. Fauquier County. Going down the line. King George County.
Yes, sir. I would say it's very local for us. One of the big concerns for me, we have an issue with smuggling of cigarettes. There's a criminal element in our county that come in, and we have a whole bunch of...
Could you please speak up?
Apologies, I have a real problem with that. I'm a little sorry.
Okay, I do too. I'm told that I do too.
I'll try to project better. But I was talking about cigarette smuggling. In our county, we have quite a number of cigarette stores right on the edge of our county. And I know that there's been multiple busts because people are coming down from like the New York region to come into the county to purchase cigarettes because the taxes are so high on cigarettes up in New York. So it's worth it to them to buy cartons and cartons and put them in a U-Haul truck, ship them up to New York, and then sell them at a discount for New York, but at a profit for them.
Being a Northeasterner, I don't think we used to do that.
And it gives a real foothold for organized crime in our county. It's a real concern. And I know as a Dillon state rule, we're not allowed to levy taxes against cigarettes, but I know there are certain localities that are given that privilege, and I would really like to see King George be allowed to do that so we can help to mitigate the desire for people to come into our county to do those kinds of activities.
Thank you very
I
much.
think Mr. Jenkins had something he wanted to
We
bring
have
up.
that down, we make note of that?
Larry, can I just jump in real quick?
Yes, sir.
I staff our VACO Finance Steering Committee, and there's a real flavor, for lack of a better term, to go after this session, particularly meals tax for counties without reparation.
The commissioner is ready. Is there any, if you come to that meeting and give us from your experience?
Actually, I'm going to send you the slide today to Jay.
That would be great. And just so you know, talk about Williamsburg and those, we're hearing from Smith Mountain, right?
Sure.
We're hearing from all over the states.
Lake Anna, you going online, Christian, you going online, they're all over. All over. Just in case of point out, it'll never happen in our rural localities. Businesses are now kind of going to Airbnb. I've got a very active B&B community, so they feed a lot of information to me. There are, in large metro, the NFL cities, there are speculators that are buying up condos and using them as Airbnb, and they don't live a day in those things. And then they give long-term rental arrangements with companies. And all this is flying under the radar. And so, that kind of eyes open. We've got folks that are just trying to use some extra products. We've got like the woods, and so they're bringing it out. But when the number of he did his analysis, there are a lot of assumptions. I can equate lost revenue to a kindergartner, sign-on for a deputy, a jail, half a quarter jail day or something like that. So everything is dear. The only other thing that I have is one that is an emerging, and I don't have much more to say. We're starting a pretty big broadband project. We're on the cusp of using some hopefully federal grant funds to build a 33-mile open access fiber network to serve our schools, but also to add additional dark fiber count onto that, to have about 288 fiber count in the county. Coupled with that, we are going to be building a number of communication antennas to host a land mobile radio system for public safety, radio towers, multi-use towers for public safety, fixed wireless broadband providers, private sector, and potentially some space for that revenue is not being modeled. We'll also serve the network, will serve these towers. One of the potential partnerships that we're starting to develop is Rappahannock Electric Co-op. And the way, and I'll bring up the lovely word federal preemption, is that it appears in the Telecommunications Act of 1994, cable companies, not in radio, I'm a Comcast customer. We're able to get an exemption from state law to be able to use power line easements, basically co-op easements, say that, to hang cable for telecommunications. They have to pay a whole attachment fee, and that's a whole other reward for co-ops, but they do it. But for a co-op to use their own easement for fiber optic communications, or maybe to work with our broadband before we get this stuff, they can't do it. They can't do it. Or it's really unclear because that easement is provided for power transmission and distribution. The Federal Telecommunications Act preempts that easement to allow the cable companies to do it as long as they pay the full attachments. So you have the company, the co-op that owns the right of way, that owns the easement, can't partner with us because they can't use it for something that the cable companies already use. That's as I understand it now. Kent Farmer and I are having too many conversations. Yeah, you're starting to. So I think there's a state fix here. And we need to get some more bright minds around it. I'm not trying to carry the co-op's water, but we need them to be a partner with us. They want, I think, to be a partner with us. And we're all about trying to get last mile broadband. Now, fiber has got to be part of that equation, overhead or underground. So I'm learning more about this, and I'm certainly more about.
I think that issue, because we are going to cover broadband and wireless, economic development is a priority issue. So, I mean, regard after this, we get heads on, we can start getting into.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far ahead of it, and then you go back and all that. I'm looking selfishly at how do we develop a partnership. And our partner can't do it because they're bars by state law or SEC.
It won't be with us. We we are gonna have Secretary Karen Jackson.
Yep.
And said, if you were,
I didn't get there.
You haven't already.
Yeah, no, this is starting to come up in the last few months. That's all I had, and I'll stand down.
Good job, Brian. Thank you.
The only thing I do want to add is what Troy said about the state prisoners. They really need effects.
All right, thank you. Anything else from Orange County?
Come spend a lot of money, see Montpelier, have some good wine.
Stay in an Airbnb.
Stay
Stay in the ends of Montpelier.
Okay, have anyone here tonight from Rappahannock County?
Hey, Larry, I spoke with Debbie Kaiser earlier today, and their biggest concern right now is the Airbnb issue.
Okay. We got that written down, Rappahannock County, Airbnb. Another issue we had has been very common to a lot of these meetings. Broadband, another example. There's so much in common that so many regions have. Spotsylvania County, I don't think there is. No. That leaves, last but not least, Stafford County.
Our board subcommittee is working on a legislative package right now. I haven't seen a draft yet, so there may be some new issues that I'm not aware of, but a couple of the ones that are always, we try to focus on 7 or 8 and no more, because legislators don't want to take 30 things and not get anything passed. But we jump on the jail per diem thing every year. We have a regional jail, so it's a several $1 million problem, state responsible inmates. But also there's this quirky thing where it's not funded into the budget like it should be, and then we're always told, well, it's going to come, mid-year, the caboose, and there's this $1 million question every year, like, are they going to do it? And they always do, but one of these years, the pin's going to drop, and we're going to be left with $1 million problem in the middle of a budget year. So we're just constantly asking if they would fund that correctly as part of the main budget like they should. The proper legislation, as a board, we had a lot of legal advice, and we've taken a pretty hard line. We had a couple of developers who rushed into the deadline and got it in before it took place. But we have a couple of developments. There's a 2,500 home proposal out in my district. Yeah, so we're not talking to them. And I think they've emailed both of us 3 times this week, and sorry. So we and hopefully a lot of the counties have decided this is what you asked for, this is what they passed, and we're gonna stick it basically right where it is. And hopefully, I'm hearing that they will come back and revisit that, because my biggest fear is we have a ton of, Stafford sounds like a very, urban county, but we still have a lot of farmland, and what we're going to be stuck with is a bunch of 3-acre lots with absolutely no help for the infrastructure. And that's the worst possible outcome, I think, that we can see. So hopefully we do see some change there. One issue you may not be aware of, that we, 3 or 4 years ago, our cost for public day school, private day school students coming on their IEPs was costing $2 million over 2 years in a row, went over budget by almost $2 million. So we had a legislator go in, and we did a study where if we have public day school, meaning we've done this in Stafford, we've partnered with the public schools, and they can't take all the children. There's some that just do not belong in a public setting, they're dangerous to themselves and the staff. But we've had several students where we were able to create a program with our public school, and it actually saves the state money, and it saves the locality money, which you guys probably don't see a lot of those bills where we both get to save money. We actually didn't think it would go anywhere that session, and they didn't do a study. So it's going to be important that we continue to make sure they do the study, but also when the results come back, try to share it with the rest of the counties and see how you might be able to save money. Even if you can't do it with just your county, we're also looking to be able to do it from a regional perspective as well.
Is this an ongoing study that is authorized by the general?
It was done by the Child Services.
CSA.
Oh, okay.
Basically what I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but when you are meeting the needs of these children, you can't use CSA funding. But if you were allowed to use CSA funding instead of the ADM, it would actually save money. Now, the private providers lose out a little bit because they're the problem. I mean, it's costing $90,000 in some of these places for one student. So that's where the budget crisis came from. Kind of looked into it.
I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you.
So as we get more meat on the bones out.
And as you develop your final program, again, and this applies to everyone, please send it to us. Charlie?
The history on that, we created a program in Middlesex years ago and brought kids back from day placements, and it was all funded by CSA. What they did was change the way they did that and said, you're not sending them to the private placement. We don't care that you've got specialized teachers. If you're doing it in your own school, we're not spending any CSA funds, which then forces it back out into these programs that years ago were 15,000, 60,000 a student, now up to 90. So I think that's the creative part of it that has been done in other localities, but then they wouldn't allow the funding to be used for that, and so of course everybody's hands back in more expensive solutions. So that was a CSA change somewhere along the line.
I think Katie may have some light to share.
I'll just briefly, I've been attending the work group meetings that the Office of Children's Services has been running, and I can fill you in sort of excruciating detail afterward if you'd like to talk. There's also a work group going on at the Virginia Department of Education looking at ways to sort of help serve kids in their local schools or regional programs rather than private agencies. So, in work.
Oh, got a comment over here.
Okay, one other thing on Stafford, and I was on the Public Safety Committee when I was first elected, and one of the things that is still very frustrating to me, and I continue to tell my colleagues about it, is the comp board does not fund all of our deputies. When you are a growing county, right now I believe Stafford County for the last 2 or 3 years, they owe, based on population, they owe us 13 deputies. Now, obviously, they don't fund our deputies where we would pay our deputies, but still, that's money, and those are resources that we need in our county. And, it affects some of our other constitutional officers as well, but the biggest number is with our deputies. Because what do you get? One deputy for every 1,500. And that's what you're supposed to get. So I just bring that up, especially in this age that we're living in regarding all these issues in public safety. I feel it's very, very important.
That's what you're supposed to get, but it's not necessarily what you get. Is that what you're saying?
And Charlie Jett, our former sheriff, who was our sheriff for many years, very well respected in this state. He was the one that brought this to my attention when I was on public safety.
We've made a note of that one?
We've had it in our platform for the last 10 years, I guess. But we've made, there's been no effort on the state to help us out with that at all. Com board's very aware of that, 1 to 1,500, and we've even looked at some different alternative formulas for rural areas, and that hasn't passed. Just
keep beating it.
Too tough with the dollar, frankly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've hit our 9 o'clock ending time. Let me just say, the way the process works, steering committees will meet late next week. A few weeks after that, the different preliminary legislative program will be consolidated. Sometime late September, early October, it will be sent back out to the counties. We would like for this process to really be under your review. Review that document, make comments, send back to us anything that you think should be there, that maybe is not there, or any other comments. So we invite you to please participate in that process. The more participation we have, the stronger legislative program we have. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll wrap this up. If you haven't signed the sign-in sheet, please do so. When I introduced our board and staff here in Louisa County, I was remiss in introducing one of the most important people on our staff, and that's our county attorney. She stepped out since then, but I still wanted to say that. Sandra Robbins, she does an excellent job for us, and we couldn't do it without her. If I haven't met some of you, there are a few of you I have not, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves, because that's what this is about, forging new relationships. Deputy Secretary Donahue, thank you so much, and the legislators and aides, thank you so much, and a big hand for VACO for coming to Region 7.
Thank you, Stephanie, and for hosting all of us. Great meeting. Drive safe.
Great to see you. The history of
I didn't expect an answer, but I didn't necessarily expect an answer. I guess I should have said I would like to see it.
I have to be honest. So I did the 66 and the 70.
And the special thing
Nobody's happy with that.
Step up and give some knowledge.